It was a cold, foggy evening in the small town of Ravenswood. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the ticking of the old clock tower. Detective Arthur Lane sat in his cozy office, sipping hot tea and reading the newspaper. He was known as the dancing detective because of his love for ballroom dancing. But tonight, there was no time for dancing. A mysterious case had landed on his desk. The case involved the sudden disappearance of Madame Rosetta, a famous dance instructor in town. She had vanished 2 days ago, and no one had seen or heard from her since. Her students were worried, and the local police were clueless. That's when they called Detective Lane. Detective Lane put on his coat and hat, grabbed his cane, and headed to Madame Rosetta's dance studio. The studio was located in an old building on the edge of town. When he arrived, he noticed the door was slightly open. He stepped inside and found the place in complete disarray. Chairs were overturned, music sheets were scattered, and a broken mirror lay on the floor. As he examined the room, he noticed something strange. On the wooden floor, there were faint marks that looked like footprints. But these weren't ordinary footprints. They were the marks of dance steps. Detective Lane, being a dancer himself, recognized the pattern immediately. It was a waltz. He followed the steps, which led him to a small closet in the corner of the room. Inside the closet, he found a hidden door. It was locked, but Detective Lane had a knack for picking locks. With a few twists of his tools, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. Curious, he descended the stairs and found himself in a secret underground room. The room was filled with old costumes, props, and dusty boxes. But what caught his attention was a small table in the center of the room. On the table was a music box, still playing a faint tune. Next to it was a note that read, "The key is in the dance." Detective Lane was puzzled. What did the note mean? He decided to take the music box with him and continue his investigation. The next day, he visited Madame Rosetta's students to gather more information. One of her students, a young woman named Clara, mentioned something interesting. She said that Madame Rosetta had been acting strangely before her disappearance. She had been practicing a new dance routine, but she refused to teach it to anyone. Clara also recalled seeing a mysterious man in a black coat watching Madame Rosetta during her last class. Detective Lane's curiosity grew. He asked Clara to show him the dance routine Madame Rosetta had been practicing. Clara agreed and demonstrated the steps. It was a unique waltz with unusual turns and spins. Detective Lane noticed that the steps matched the marks he had seen on the studio floor. Suddenly, it clicked. The note in the secret room said, "The key is in the dance." Perhaps the dance routine was a clue to Madame Rosetta's disappearance. Detective Lane decided to perform the dance himself, following the steps exactly as Clara had shown him. As he danced, he noticed something unusual. The movements led him to a specific spot on the floor. He knelt down and tapped the wooden planks. One of them sounded hollow. Using his cane, he pried open the loose plank and found a hidden compartment. Inside was a small key and another note. The note read, "Midnight at the Old Theater." That night, Detective Lane went to the abandoned theater on the outskirts of town. The place was dark and eerie, but he wasn't afraid. He entered the theater and found Madame Rosetta tied to a chair on the stage. Standing next to her was the mysterious man in the black coat. The man laughed and said, "So you found us, Detective. But you're too late." Detective Lane remained calm. "What do you want?" he asked. The man explained that he was a former dancer who had been jealous of Madame Rosetta's success. He had kidnapped her to steal her secret dance routine, which he believed would make him famous. But Detective Lane was clever. He had brought the music box with him. He wound it up and placed it on the stage. As the music played, he began to dance the unique waltz. The man, confused, tried to stop him, but Detective Lane's movements were precise and deliberate. Suddenly, the police, who had been hiding in the shadows, rushed in and arrested the man. Detective Lane had called them earlier, knowing he might need backup. Madame Rosetta was freed, and she thanked Detective Lane for saving her. She explained that the dance routine was indeed a secret, but not for the reasons the man thought. It was a tribute to her late husband, who had been a famous dancer. Case was solved, and Detective Lane returned to his office, satisfied. As he sat down to enjoy another cup of tea, he couldn't help but smile. Another mystery solved, and he had even managed to fit in a little dancing. From that day on, the townspeople called him not just the dancing detective, but the hero of Ravenswood.